My name is Cassandra.
Senor Jeff H.
Bethany.
My name is Andy Swan. I am the current Executive Director with Community Living Kincardine District. 50 years ago, it was the expectation that individuals with a developmental disability would go to an institution in all likelihood. And fortunately, in many communities, and in Kincardine specifically, a small group of parents decided that wasn't the path they wanted to see their children go. So they started this association at that time. And it was very much a grassroots effort, and they worked very hard on their own time and their own dollar for 20 years before there was any real funding for this organization.
My name is Steffi Branda Kip.
My name is Amy. I'm in Tiverton.
Oh, I like the people's all friendly, be nice. I like their attitude. I'd be lost without it.
My name is Audrey Ferguson, and I was married to Lester Ferguson, and we were two of the founders of Community Living in Kincardine.
My name is Ann Eady. I'm the daughter of Audrey and Lester Ferguson and sister of Alan Ferguson.
My name is Marg Lamont, and my parents were John and Isabel Stone, and they were among the founding members of the Kincardine Community Living.
My name's John Stone. My parents were amongst the founding members of the Kincardine District Community Living. My older sister was Margaret Stone, who's currently Margaret Lamont, and my younger sister Mary Stone, I think, was the basis for them sort of starting the association.
My name is Tom Lambert, and my parents were Tom and Pat Lambert, and they were part of the founding group of the Kincardine District Association.
My name is Alan Ferguson.
Alan was born in 1959. We already had Anne and Joan. 4 years among them all. And they were strong babies.
It was with great anticipation that I waited for months, and when Alan was born, I was delighted to have a brother to go with my sister. I remember within a few months, though, realizing that something was wrong.
Alan was very weak. They brought him in, his little head flopped all around. His coloring wasn't good, and his breathing was worse. And when he could not suck. He worked so hard, and the sweat would be going down his face, and he wasn't getting anywhere with it. And I told the doctor, I said, there's something wrong here. But he didn't think there was anything wrong with Alan. And finally, I said to him, I want him to go to a specialist. So we got sent to Toronto, and there he was diagnosed with cerebral palsy, with the prognosis that he wouldn't live past a year or 2 years at the most. He'd never sit up. He'd never do anything. But I was so pleased that Lester accepted that, and the girls accepted that, and we thought if he has cerebral palsy, he needs a good mother and a good father. Now, I'm telling you, we met a lot of opposition. Our relatives with good intention and friends said, just put him in a home and forget about him. And my answer, of course, was, every child needs a mother and father, and a handicapable child needs them so much more. So we started out in our mission.
Miss Dawn? She was born in Kincardine Hospital, and then Dr. Millen, who was here at the time, he realized that there was a problem, and she was transferred to London within just a few hours of being born. And I remember I was at a birthday party, and remember coming home from the birthday party, and they had transferred her to London. My parents, I don't think, knew that much about Down syndrome either at the time, and I think they were hoping that she would eventually be able to read and to print and this sort of thing. And I think that was another reason why they, like, Mom and Dad tried to help her out at home as well, but I think they wanted her more in the school setting to learn how to do these things for herself, basically. Because with her being the youngest too, it was, you know, she was the baby, I guess, so they wanted her to have the same as what my brother and I had.
I look back and you're sort of guessing what was going through their minds, and I'm not sure that the parents in general, mine included, had a real objective. It's just, you know, my child now needs to start school, and there isn't one, so we're going to have to start one.
There was no school to go to at that time, so it wasn't anything for our handicapable people. And everybody went to sick children's hospital, you're wasting your time, no matter what, and it was pretty discouraging. So John Stone came out. That was my early recollections. That was Mary's father, to see what could be done. His daughter Mary had Down syndrome. And from there on, we got the school going in the Presbyterian Church.
It was pretty exciting when, with John Stone, I remember the Stones, and of course Mrs. Lambert, who was the president of W.E. Thompson Home and School. I really have to give credit to those people who did not have a child of their own who was developmentally challenged, but saw the need and stepped up to the plate to start community living in 1963.
There. There.
Very good. The first school was set up in the basement of the Presbyterian Church in Kincardine. Yeah, Dad was the president. Lester Ferguson was the vice president, and then they got other volunteers and to make up the board.
I'm thinking of the people that I remembered as the most consistent volunteers when I went to picnics or any event as a child where all the parents and families got together. And there were quite a few. But Pat Lambert, Mrs. Tom Lambert, we called her back then, and Mrs. Schufelt, Verna Schufelt, and there was a Mrs. Fair, and of course Bruce Trindle was on the first school board along with W.E. Thompson, or Elmer Thompson as he was known. So those people really have to be recognized for stepping up When it was maybe not the most popular thing to do, the attitude was, oh, just put them all in institutions. They saw the need, they saw that those parents needed some support, and they dedicated hours and hours and hours to, as volunteers after their regular job, to provide that support.
And don't forget, in the 40s and 50s, nobody had TV up here. A lot of people didn't even have a radio. So the community being small and everybody connected, it was natural. And they were used to that kind of approach to life, and I think. Growing up during the Depression, they had nothing. So helping other people, I think, was just part of what they did. That's how they viewed things. I don't think it was anything. They would never think it was special. Specifically, how Mom and Dad got involved with the association is really a mystery to me. I don't know, other than the fact that it doesn't surprise me, because that's the kind of people they were.
So the first executive members for community living were John Stone, Mrs. Tom Lambert, Lester Ferguson, Elmer Thompson, Mrs. Elizabeth Whittick, I always refer to her as Betty Whittick, and Mrs. Vaughn Russell. Right from the start, Dad was involved, and it didn't matter if it needed to be done, he'd be off. Dad would always drop everything if there was an issue with community living. If something needed to be done, he was totally committed. All his life. And even when he retired from farming, he made community living his priority. He was over 40 years on the board.
Somehow they found Mrs. Emerson, who was our first teacher, and I think she was a retired school teacher, and then somehow they got a hold of her and convinced her to take this on, and so she set that up. So she was the first school teacher, and of course lovely. She's like everybody's mother kind of thing. So she was just great with the kids, and so that's how it started.
Mrs. Emerton did her part for sure. She did well. She had them reading, and she would have them all in a circle telling them the story. And when Alan would come home, he would get all his little creatures, whatever they were, teddy bears, dolls, gets them all out, and he would tell them the story. She was one of the best teachers there was. You know, he got more from her than anybody else after that, as far as teaching was concerned. And she had them reading some, and she took them, she and her husband Herb took them over to the high school to do things at the high school. They had the use of the facilities over there.
Very wonderful people to start. So the focus, as I remember, was always the school. There'd be a picnic, we'd go to the concert, and the families would congregate at the school. Sometimes we were down at the parks by the lake, and there were picnics and games then for us children. And we got to know the other siblings as well. So I've known Margie and John Stone for a long time, Marg Lamont, since our childhood.
Now the school moved 3 or 4 times after that. There's a little schoolhouse out on the south line that they went to for a short time. And then they moved over to what was called the Chickie School, which is now where Elgin Market School is. And then from there they went out to a schoolhouse on the 4th of Huron, just right across the road from the Pine River Church. Until then, they moved here. But Mary went to Arc Industries in Walkerton for a few years.
And then it was so needed right in her own hometown. Having them sent over to Walkerton, been in with the Walkerton Association, was not all that great.
This is late 70s, and I'm trying to remember whether it was 1978 or 79. I know it was around the time I got married. So I remember Dad coming home, and I was at Mom and Dad's that night, And Dad said, well, I guess we're not going to have an association anymore. We've decided we just can't get new directors, and we're just going to let everything go to Walkerton. Well, Mom, I just remember her standing straight up and said, no, we're not. We need a group here locally to be a local advocate for people needing programs, for family needing programs in the Kincardine and Ripley and Tiverton areas. We're going to get new people, the board is not going to fold, and we're going to reorganize. So she went out and she recruited some new volunteers. Julian and Catherine Bailey were two of those volunteers, and Julian had been quite active in other things in the Kincardine community, as had Catherine, and they had adopted a girl with special needs. I had taught her in school. And then Sue Ferguson, she was married to my cousin Murray. Mom recruited her, and a few others, but those were sort of the initial people. So when I came back from university, I joined the board. Dad was on the board, and Mrs. Elston. Mrs. Elston was a very dedicated volunteer from the early years as well. And her son, Rod, was one of the early members of the school. Maybe not that very first year, but very shortly after. So they were still on as faithful volunteers. So Julian became president. I was vice president. Dad stayed on as treasurer. I think Sue Ferguson maybe was secretary right then, and the other people filled other positions. Catherine Bailey was our communications person. So our profile in the community started to rise again, but it was probably due to Mom's determination that the Kincardine area was going to have an association to advocate for the families and all the developmentally challenged in the area. That was the turning point then. And I kid you not, she made it quite clear that it would be over her dead body that the Kincardine and District Association was going to fold. And it didn't, it kept going.
My name is Mary Ann.
Hello, my name is Shelley.
In 1983, we became incorporated, and incorporation was the building block to start to receive transfer fee payment funds from the Ministry of Community and Social Services. And that's when the staff model of support for this organization began. So from 1963 to 1983, it was all grassroots and volunteer based. And we began getting funding after becoming incorporated in 1983, and quickly thereafter we grew.
And then my husband, Doug, took over, and he was president for a while in there, but Doug was on for over 20 years. One of my memories is Doug